Hi, my name is Bob from Virginia. I've lived here for about 25 years, and I want to talk a little bit about my experience with my pain in my back. We were downstairs working out. She had gone upstairs, and I was into about an hour on elliptical, and I was working out pretty hard, and I felt something in my back just snap. Um, it was a physical, I felt it. I feel like I heard it. And the next thing, my legs went out from under me and I was falling. And I fell on the floor, couldn't get up, laid there for, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes, just agony. I crawled to the steps, was able to get hot kind of standing, got up the steps, waited a day or two to see if things were going to calm down. And then I went and saw an orthopedic surgeon, just because that's who you go to, right? When you've done something like that.
That's
I
what
knew
you do. Yeah.
that's what you do.
Yeah.
I've had experience in the emergency room with folks who come in like that, and they just automatically give you, muscle relaxants and pain pills. And I'm not a pain pill guy. I really don't like pain pills.
That's good. Yeah, they gave me muscle relaxers too. I mean,
Yeah, and it's just, it just relaxes you, right?
uh, put you to
It doesn't.
sleep.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I wanted to wait a couple of days and see if it settled down, and it did not. And so I went and saw. My wife and I have gone to this particular clinic multiple times. As a runner, she's had her knee scoped a couple of times when she had mechanical problems with her knees, and we trusted the doctors there. So saw him and ran an MRI, did the X-ray, did the MRI, brought the MRI back, and said, "Okay, well, we're going to do surgery." And I said, "Well, I don't want to do surgery. Let's talk about this. Let's see what we can, what the alternatives are." And he said, "There are no alternatives. You're in for surgery. You've got a disc that's bulging. It's in danger of rupturing. You've got spinal stenosis. You've got some congenital issues with that part of your spine. So we're going to go in there. We're going to fix it, and you're going to feel great. It's not an easy surgery, but you're going to do fine. You're fit. You're going to do fine."
So you had no choice.
There was no
Just
choice.
like me, I had three surgeons tell me I had to have surgery.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. And I learned over time. I did go back and I saw three or four other doctors to get a second opinion. And what I figured out by the third time, and I had an honest conversation with the third and fourth doctor, is that my doctor was just following the medical association's guidance for what is done in those situations. They don't know what to do with chronic pain. And that was one of the things that really got me about Dr. Sarno's books was, as soon as they diagnose you with chronic pain, that means they're following almost like a recipe for what they do, and they're not going to deviate. So
Why
I
do
put
you
up.
why do you think that 40 years after he wrote the book Healing Back Pain, that none of the doctors or surgeons ever mentioned stress as a possible cause?
I don't know, but I can tell you, I'm still a emergency medical technician. I have worked in emergency rooms. I had a whole career. I was a medic in the Army long ago, and not ever, with the exception of the Army medical training where they teach you about stress on the battlefield. So, they teach you how easily cures can come with the right attitude. And I think Dr. Sarno may actually mentioned that in one of his books, how combat wounded people don't seem to have as much pain as they really should have. If you compare their injuries to somebody in civilian life, it's because there's such a relief of not being on the battlefield and such a relief that they survived. And so there's a lot there. They're under stress, they're tense, but they don't feel the pain quite like other folks do for reasons that are, in the in
Interesting. I didn't know that. And I think he was in World War II,
I believe
so
he was. Yeah, I
yeah.
think he was. I was fortunate that I had several friends that had actually gone through the surgery. Not fortunate for them, but fortunate for me. And so I spent a little time. One of them was a really great employee that I had at the time, and he had been through three surgeries. And so he explained to me that the first surgery was all it was going to take. And then a couple of years later, that had to be tweaked. And then a couple of years later, that had to be tweaked. And he was looking at his fourth surgery. His recommendation was find a way to live with the pain or live without the surgery, but do not do the surgery. I called a friend of mine who's a nurse, actually my best friend's wife, and she put me in touch with her sister, who is a malpractice nurse for an insurance company. And what she told me was after, she has seen dozens and dozens of these cases, and her recommendation was don't have surgery. So it was really interesting that people who had the surgery and nurses were telling me these are not slouches. I mean, these are people you've done great, had great careers and done well. And they're telling me that the surgery's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think I say it in the course that the only thing that stopped me from getting the surgery was that my prerequisite was to find at least one person who would recommend it.
Yeah. And
I never got it.
I couldn't find that person.
No.
I couldn't find that person.
I've got 3 friends since Laura and I started doing this who ignored our warnings about it and did it, and they all said that it worked. And then we later heard that they were lying. It didn't work.
Oh, that's too bad.
Their ego wouldn't allow them to say that it hadn't worked, but through one way or another, we found out all 3 of them it didn't work.
Oh, that's too bad. That's too bad because I'm sure your hopes get so high. It's like, I mean, I talked about in my write-up that I was at several points where I was just so frustrated, and so I would have done almost anything. And I made myself call one of those friends again or one of those nurses and say, God, it really hurts today. And it's like, just get through the day, right? Find something that gives you some relief today, but don't have the surgery. Don't call the doctor back. And I talked to 4 doctors and they all said exactly the same thing. So when I began to poke around, I was actually, I had helped our daughter load some things in the back of the car, and my back was just killing me. We were visiting her down in Florida, and I was laying on her floor, just wondering what I was going to do because I couldn't get through a couple of hours without this pain. And that's when I discovered Sarno's first book that I read, and I was just Googling, looking at, for probably the 500th time, looking for the right, and way buried down the search, I finally saw something about relief of chronic back pain. And
right. Yeah. Was that Healing Back Pain his first book? Because he put one out before that, but most people, I'm not even sure what it was called, but yeah, that was the big one.
Yeah, that really got my attention. And as I said in my article, as I read, I think the second book that I read, I really got energized. And then I started looking, I realized that I wasn't going to do this on my own, right? I'm a program manager and I understand how to put things in order and kind of how to build things for action. And so, so you can do something about it. And I could not put together what I needed to climb out of that. So one of my next searches discovered the Pain Cure Clinic. And when I saw that you're fans of Dr. Sarno and following his practices, and you put it into practical terms, things that I could actually do. I listened, I bought the course, probably went through it twice end to end, and then I went back and I sampled various things that I knew were in there that I wanted to hear again. And I kept reading, I read the, perfectionism books, I read, all the stuff. And at some point in time, I just woke up one morning and the pain was gone for the first time in 5 years. And I thought it must have been a mistake. I mean, that was the first thing I thought was, where's my pain? Like, where's my companion? And
was it incremental or was it just like that?
So I found that as the more I got into the reading and studying your texts and your videos, the closer I got. I was able to stop my allergies. I think I've had lots of injuries, so I had symptom imperatives going off all over the place.
Everybody does.
I learned that those were actually fairly easy to defeat, like allergies. I kept wondering why in this 5-year period, my allergies were coming and going and they would come with no warning, no reason. And then when I read that allergies can be, part of the issue, I learned that to stop my allergies. I could stop coughing. I could stop sneezing. I could stop my running eyes. And so then I knew I could do the rest of it, right? And I started chasing the symptom imperatives around my body until they finally quit. And then the back though was literally one day it hurt and the next day it didn't.
Wow.
It came again. It came and went a little bit, for over a few months. And it was as bad when it came back as it was before. But one of the things I think maybe you said in one of your teachings was that, you have to challenge that. You can't try to solve the physical problem by dealing only with the physical problem. You have to understand that there's a psychological challenge that you have to overcome. So I learned to think about these issues psychologically and began to kind of using Dr. Sarno's terms, or actually maybe I don't know who was talking. Maybe I think it was Sarno talking about one of Freud's contemporaries that talked about your subconscious, your unconscious, keeping the prisoners at bay. And so I began to think in terms of letting the prisoners out, right, and dealing with things mentally instead of trying to solve the physical problem. And that's when it started to go away, as I stopped dealing with that. And then I added the physicality back in, my workouts back in. And, I really enjoyed your newsletters where you talked about running on the trail and just running through it and how suddenly it would stop. And I have found the same thing. I've found the same thing.
Yeah, that when you retreat from that physically, it doesn't help, and it's just a natural thing to do. Well, it hurts. Pain is a warning to stop, of course, but in this case, the warning is wrong.
Right, right, and I think I talk a little bit, and I tell my friends who watch me go through this that TMS for me was, it was a painful positive thing. I learned how disintegrated my mind and body had become. And by being mindful and focusing on these disciplines and practices, I really feel like I brought my mind and my body back together. And it's, I feel like it's funny, but to say this way, but I feel like I trust myself again. I don't, it's almost like, when kids get up and it's time to go out and play with their friends, they just get up and go. And that's kind of the way my life has gotten. I don't wake up in the morning and think, is this going to hurt when I step out of bed? Or, if I lift that box, am I going to be in pain? Or if I try to throw a football with my son, am I going to be in pain? And the answer now is no, I'm not. So I'd like to thank John and Laura for doing what they do. I don't think I would have found my way to the cure with any other help. It was awesome. The tools that I picked up, the lessons I learned, I continue to apply in my daily life. And I'm very grateful for Laura and John and all that they do.